everyone. Welcome back to the Integrative Health Coach Success Podcast. So great to have all of you with us. Looking forward to our topic of the day, which is going to be a specific skill that I believe will separate even a great coach from a transformative coach. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what that means. It's a skill that I've touched upon before in other episodes, but I'm really looking forward to talking very specifically about this one skill set. And it has nothing to do with more protocols, nothing to do with more certifications, frameworks. It is something that you can all start to do right now, as long as you can get comfortable with some of the things that come with it. And it is the art of asking questions, questions that will land so deeply with your clients that they could literally remember them for the rest of their lives. They could evoke serious, deep change in habits that have kept them stuck for a really long time. Okay. The best part of this is, again, you don't need more certifications. You don't need to go out and learn something new. You just need to be able to shift conversations at certain times and guide your clients through this process. So let's dive in. Looking forward to getting started. So some key points that kind of are, I think, important to understand before we get started with what kind of specific questions you can ask is there's advice everywhere. Right? Our clients can go to social media, they can read advice, they can get advice from lots of different coaches, lots of different doctors, lots of different mentors. There's plenty of places to hear more advice and words at you. Okay, but advice typically will create short-term change, and questions create ownership. So when we ask a client a question, they're able to kind of own that answer because they're answering it on their own rather than being kind of told what advice they should take. Clients are more motivated by insight that they find within themselves. I think that this is also true with children, right? We talk about, or a lot of experts talk about how the best way for children to learn is through experience, right? Making mistakes, challenging themselves, coming to a conclusion on their own rather than them being told what they need to know and kind of being talked at. Breakthrough questions can change identity and not just behavior. So when you ask really thought-provoking questions, you have the ability to change someone's whole identity or the way that they have looked at themselves, their situation, their circumstances for a really long time, rather than just changing their behavior. Usually a change in identity will shift behavior. Just because if someone no longer identifies or can shift their identity or their relationship to a specific thought, to a specific pattern, the behavior automatically changes. Sometimes this is what keeps someone stuck, right? They are too identified with the unhealthy version of themselves that they've been for so long that they have to find a way to kind of unravel that. And I find that questions can be incredibly powerful in doing so. And I think our job as coaches, while it is to educate, while it is to teach and sometimes direct them in a certain way, a lot of our job, I think, is to reveal, to hold a space where they are able to reveal to themselves what needs to change, what habits need to shift, what beliefs about themselves would have to be different in order to create a different outcome. I certainly know with myself, I know with lots of other coaches that I've talked to, that we can oftentimes meet with clients who have met with, 3, 4 other different practitioners before us, other doctors, other naturopaths, other health coaches. Why are they still seeking answers? Yes, maybe it's because they haven't found the right protocol. Maybe it's because they haven't found the right support system. But typically, in my belief, there is some habit, there is some belief still deeply kind of wound inside that hasn't allowed them to step into a new version of themselves and achieve something different, right? When a client hears advice, they might feel inspired for a moment, right? They feel inspired by hearing it. They feel inspired by, okay, that's like a great idea. But when a client discovers something for themselves, it becomes part of their identity. I think this is true with kids too. I talk a lot about how I think approaching adults, just like big kids, can be really helpful, especially when it comes to needing to kind of tap into limiting beliefs and whatnot. My kids are far more open to what they learn themselves than what I tell them they need to do. Sometimes this is where mistakes, right, need to happen. Mistakes oftentimes are learning tools. And this is because when we discover things on our own, we own it differently than if someone just tells us what we need to do next. Okay, so there are, in my opinion, 4 types of questions that you can ask clients that can really help them transform not only their health and wellness, but generally their life as well. I'm going to run through all 4, and then I'm going to touch upon every single one specifically. So the first one is identify revealing questions. So identifying, so it talks about their identity essentially. So their identity revealing questions. The second one is pattern interrupting questions. The third is going to be agency restoring questions. And the fourth will be deepening questions. Let's touch upon all 4 in a little bit more depth because I think they're all super beneficial. Okay, so the first one, identity revealing questions. This will help a client connect behavior to their identity. So what do some of these look like? Who do you become when you honor the habit of moving your body every day? How do you feel, okay, when you drink more water? What version of you is asking for a change? We're asking them to think about who they are, how they identify, and how their behaviors may be linked to that belief in identity. And again, being able to ask these questions is one part of it, right? Sometimes you need to sit on the other side of the table or the other side of the computer and wait. You need to be comfortable with silence and let them kind of think instead of maybe, rushing to offer them a potential answer. Or maybe the client says to you, it's been feeling really hard to exercise lately. Okay. Who are you when you honor that? When you honor daily movement, who do you become? Maybe they say, I don't know. Or maybe they just sit in silence. You could rephrase it. How does it feel when you honor that commitment? And wait for them to give you an answer. Because again, you are letting them come up with the identity that they create around the thought of movement, or the identity that they would create around healthier eating habits. They're able to make these connections simply by answering the question. Okay, so that's the first one. The second one is pattern interrupting questions. So these might look like they break up autopilot thinking essentially. And sometimes I ask, what would it mean for you to not be broken? Sometimes clients are like, I need to fix this. I need to fix that. I need to fix such and such. And fixing something, we usually fix things that are broken. And so sometimes I'll say, what if nothing's actually wrong here? What if your body's protecting you? What if your mind's protecting you? What if you're not broken at all? Or I would say, how do you know that belief is true? Okay, we'll go back to the movement example. I haven't been moving lately. It's just not something I love to do. How do you know that's true? Do you know for sure that you don't love to exercise? Okay, maybe the client says, no, I don't know that for sure. Okay, so what feels hard about exercise? Finding the time. Okay, so finding the time to exercise feels hard. What does time mean to you? Well, I need time to do all of the other things. Okay, there's a lot of other things. I hear you saying that it sounds like there's a lot of other things that are important to get done. Do you feel like those things are more important than exercise? Maybe they say yes. And you can say, okay, why is that true? Do you know that to be true? And again, just asking clients questions can be a really thought-provoking way for them to, again, maybe the client's like, oh, actually, on Monday, I got my nails done instead of moving my body. And I don't know if that really feels like that's more important than exercise based on my goals right now. instead of you telling them that it shouldn't be that important or asking them the direct question of, okay, well, what else did you do today and why was that more important? You give them the opportunity by asking the proper questions to arrive at some of those answers on their own. Okay, so third is agency restoring questions. So these empower the client when they feel stuck or powerless. So what's one thing you can't control today? Maybe the client is, I don't have any time for myself. Maybe they're the parent of small children and they work and there's no time for them and they feel like they're wildly out of control. So you could say, what's one thing you can control today? Okay, I'm in control of how much water I drink, or I'm in control of what I eat, right? You're asking them to identify something that they have full agency and control over. Another question could be, if you were already successful at this, what would you do next? So, okay, if you already were really good at eating well and drinking more water, what could you do next to deepen your health and wellness? Right? You're giving them the power to think about how they could take the next best steps, how they could change the situation that they kind of feel so helpless in, that they don't have enough time or they don't have enough resources, or they're kind of on the back burner, right? You're restoring agency to them rather than, again, just giving them another solution. Let them think about what they can control rather than giving them examples or ways that they need to take back control. Okay. The fourth is deepening questions. This will take their first answer and go deeper. So if a client says to you, maybe you ask them, like, what's one thing you can control today? Maybe they say, like, honestly, it feels like I can't control anything. Why does it feel like you can't control anything? Or what does it feel like when you can't control anything? It feels frustrating. Why does it feel frustrating? Because I can't put myself first. Why don't you continue to ask questions about what it is they're feeling and experiencing, and you kind of go one layer deeper. Typically, the answers underneath are the ones that kind of create the most breakthrough. So oftentimes, like anger or frustration has a different emotion under it. Sometimes it's fear. Sometimes it's, feelings of self-worth. And by continuing to kind of ask questions and reflecting, kind of like, it sounds like I'm hearing you say there's a lot of frustration about putting yourself first. What kind of a feeling does that evoke? Is it feelings of, inadequacy, worth? And again, getting them to kind of think about why they're in this kind of mental loop to begin with. Okay, so step one, kind of slowing down the moment. Okay. When you ask these questions, you are slowing down the moment so that you're giving them time to think rather than just filling the time with your advice. Okay. Asking the question that maybe they've never been asked before. Right? You're asking them questions that maybe the other 4 practitioners didn't ask, and that's why they never got to their breakthrough. It doesn't need to sound fancy. It just needs to sound sincere, potentially unexpected. If it's a little bit uncomfortable for you to say, what is the belief there, right? Maybe it's a client who says, my whole family is overweight. I've never been a healthy weight. A question I would ask there is, who would you become if you were to become healthy, to lose weight, and maybe be the first person in your family to do that? What would you have to get really comfortable with in order to do that, right? Because it can almost feel like you're alienating yourself or you are becoming something else separate from your family, right? There can be a lot of those emotional ties to behaviors, to habits. So asking a question that maybe they've never been asked before, done in a really authentic, compassionate, and supportive way, can be very transformative. Step 3, let the question sink in, right? Let them sit with the question. Sometimes, in my opinion, this can be the hardest part. Silence can sometimes be uncomfortable. Asking the question and then letting them sit with it a little bit. And maybe there's silence. Honestly, sometimes I ask questions and there's just immediate tears. and like they don't say anything. And I will say to them, it's okay. I want you to cry. I want you to feel this, the immediate emotion that just came up. That's deep emotion. Feel that. And then we'll talk about kind of like what's there, but let yourself work through that. That is a knee jerk, immediate emotional release. If a client cries when you ask them a question, in my opinion, you've struck gold, right? You're at the potential for a breakthrough because they are having an emotional experience just to a question. You haven't even gotten underneath it yet. And so don't feel bad if they start crying, right? Know that you are there to support them. You're there to offer compassion. You're there to walk them through this. Say like, it's okay. I'm going to help you work through this. This could be really transformative for you. I think the fact that you're crying means that there's a lot of emotion here. This might be why you've been stuck. It's okay. Just feel it. We have to feel to heal. We'll talk it through when kind of your emotion feels like it's moved. Okay. Again, that can be the hardest part, is like sitting in that discomfort as a coach. The more you get comfortable with your own emotions, though, the better you'll be at it for sure. The silence is sometimes the most powerful coaching tool you can have. And interrupting it can sometimes, prevent the breakthrough. So let them kind of just think for a second. They might rush to answer the question because they're just as uncomfortable as silence. And you might say like, all right, if you think of something else, we can come back to it. But if they don't give you the kind of answer that you think they're going to give, or that you think is the real underlying issue, again, that might not be the moment where it happens. Asking the question when have you ever been asked a question? I have been asked a question where like you then go back and think about it days later. So oftentimes these clients can go away and they can come back with breakthroughs too. It doesn't have to happen in that moment, right? So really important to know. Okay, so I'm going to give you some kind of like general questions that I think can be really helpful and powerful when it comes to those 4 types. And you can kind of write these down, or you can keep them. Sometimes there'll be ones that fit with one client and, they don't pertain to another. So first one, what becomes possible for you when this changes? So what are the possibilities that your life could have if this changed? I was recently talking to a client who has been overweight for so many years. She had her first grandchild. She's like, this is just really, I need to get healthy. This is like the end of my rope. This like little girl has changed my life. And I said to her, like, what will become possible for you if this finally changes? Because I could tell that that's where her pattern of thinking was going. And of course, she was like, well, I'll be able to live longer, and I'll be able to, play with her and get down on the ground and my knees won't hurt, and I'll be able to go away with her because flying won't be uncomfortable. So it's, again, instead of me assuming that those are all of the things that would get better and telling her that, right, she's going to be able to be motivated for change by her coming up with these on her own, just from me asking the question. So what becomes possible for you when this changes? What part of you is trying to protect you by not taking action? I love this one, okay? Because this is a lot about self-worth. Do you fear? Are you not taking action because you're fearing failure? Because there's people who love you for, your depressed state. So this is a good one. What part of you is trying to protect you by not taking action? When did you decide that story was true? What's the belief behind that behavior? What would this look like if it were easier? What are you afraid might happen if you succeed? What does your future self wish you'd focus on today? If nothing needed to be fixed, what would you choose next? Where are you taking this harder than it needs to be? Where are you making this harder than it needs to be? So those are some all really good kind of thought-provoking questions. And I think that if you started to implement this just here and there, it's not going to fit every client. Not every client needs this approach, but I find that this approach is the most beneficial when it comes to clients who are stuck. Certainly. Okay. Clients who have worked with lots of practitioners in the past and just kind of can't find that breakthrough moment. And start with clients that you're comfortable with, or clients that you know kind of could be receptive to this. I had a client once that kept saying, I don't know what to do. I just know what I shouldn't do, or I know why I don't know why I don't do it. I know what to do, but I don't know why I don't do it. And again, that client doesn't need necessarily more strategy. They need to break the pattern, identity, or behavior behind why they're not doing the thing that they know they should do. Okay, so who would you need to become in order to stop doing that? Or who would you become if you stop doing that? So maybe they said, okay, I would probably become a healthier person if I stopped binging snacks before bed. And what would it mean if you became healthier? Would that be uncomfortable for you? Does it sound great? Does it sound hard? It sounds great. Okay. And so who would you have to become to not snack right before bed? What behavior would have to shift? What belief about you would need to be different? Maybe I asked the third question. And they answer in a way that then you can ask a deeper question, right? And so again, just uncovering that second layer, again, usually at the bottom, there's some sort of self-worth, there's some sort of limiting belief about who they are, what they are worthy of, and how kind of that can be intertwined to family systems, really self-love, and getting to kind of the bottom of that. Again, super, super powerful stuff. Okay. So thank you all for tuning in. If you found this episode helpful and you want me to even kind of dive a little bit deeper into the whole kind of aspect of questions and talk about it more, certainly let us know. I hope you guys found that episode helpful and look forward to being back with you next time.